Live button. So let's wait for the stream to fire up across the internet. Looks like it's getting warmed up as we speak. So we are simulcasting on YouTube and Facebook. And my understanding is this may be the last time that we ever multi-stream over to Periscope, because I think Periscope is now gone. And it's looking like I am having a hard time confirming that the stream is live, but it looks like we're alive and well. So let's get going. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today. We're talking about Derek Chauvin, of course. It is day 15 of the Chauvin trial, and we've got a lot to get into. We had a number of different government witnesses who were there today, some interesting, some not so interesting. We're going to talk about three of them. Number one is going to be the store clerk, who was the person who actually received some of the interaction with George Floyd. We're going to talk about a man, an older gentleman, who identified himself as sort of a nosy man, just a nosy guy. He was just sort of poking around the neighborhood, wanted to see what all the commotion was about. And he had a conversation also with George Floyd. So we're going to break down that incident as well. Then lastly, the last witness that we're going to hear from, not particularly interesting because he's a foundational witness, but he laid the framework for the government to be able to continue to talk about the on-body cameras. So we're going to flesh out those three witnesses, and that will cover Chauvin. We're going to change gears. Late last night, if you were poking around the internet, you couldn't miss this, but Representative Matt Gaetz is now in the middle of some weird thing going on. Allegedly, the New York Times is saying that he is under investigation from the Department of Justice surrounding some sort of pay for underage sex with a 17-year-old at some point. Simultaneously, as that allegation is coming his direction, he's saying, no, wait a minute. This is just reparations for me being involved in this extortion scheme. And we're actually working with people who are a part of law enforcement to uncover this extortion plot. What? So that was all breaking last night, and we're going to break that down. We've got a lot of different clips, different reactions. Matt Gaetz was on Tucker Carlson last night, kind of a weird little dance those two were doing. So we got a lot to break down on that story. And then lastly, the most boring segment of the day, of course, is all about this infrastructure plan. Joe Biden today, sort of new information coming out about what this plan looks like. Looks like it's a $2 trillion plan. We're going to go through, show you where all this money is going. We've got some reaction from some people. We got Larry Kudlow over on Fox News Business. We also have cocaine Mitch McConnell in the House. Mitch McConnell released a statement this afternoon, so we'll break that down, kind of weigh whether or not this is going to be passing the congressional caucus, whatever, and passed in the form of actual legislation. But we've got a ways, I think, until we get there, but we'll see. So we got a lot to get into is my point. If you want to be a part of the show, if you want to ask questions, if you want to leave a comment, if you want to lob a criticism, feel free to do that over at our platform at locals.com. Watchingthewatchers.locals is the name of our community, and you can grab a copy of these slides that I'm about to go through and post links throughout the day and meet other very nice, like-minded people, just like yourself. So go on over there to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right, so let's get into the news of the day. Derek Chauvin trial, day 15. The government called many new witnesses today. We were wrapped up some of the questioning that was taking place yesterday with the people are calling her the hostile firefighter. Yesterday, we sort of closed the show and closed the day in court with the judge Cahill scolding her for being overly argumentative with Eric Nelson, the defense lawyer for Derek. And saw her today finish her line of questioning. Nothing else happened, right? Very easy. I think one or two questions out of her. And so she moved on. And then we started getting into new witnesses. Some were interesting. Some were kind of not interesting. I don't really know what they were there for, other than the fact that the government just sort of wanted to really double down on their claim. So we're going to get into all of this. Let's first start by taking a look at the board. This is the trial board that we have. We saw a lot of testimony, or a lot of questioning today from Mr. Frank. We also saw Mr. Schleicher down here, and then we saw this new woman. I still don't know her name yet, but she is a new prosecutor. And yesterday she was out there interviewing the underage children, or the minors at the time, and we didn't see much else from some of the other people. But today we had 3 different prosecutors, of course, out there on the field, and we also saw Eric Nelson doing some cross-examination. So we're going to break this down. We're going to start off with the first witness, who was the store clerk. And I think we have this guy. This is his image right here. And so he was literally working at the store. His name is Mr. Martin. One of the first real full witnesses that we got today, and he was in the court when George Floyd went into the building. And so this was the scene. This was a screenshot from some of his testimony today. This is the store clerk, who's basically seated here for a large part of the testimony today. This is George Floyd, who's over here, and he's sort of walking around this store for a good period of time, somewhere about, you can see here, 7:35. And he doesn't really leave until about 7:45. So he's in there for, well over 10 minutes, or right around that time. And you're going to notice as you're sort of watching the testimony today, he's kind of pacing back and forth. He goes off camera over here, trying to buy something, so on and so forth. Not really relevant to a lot of the issues at trial, but they're framing this stuff out. They're laying foundation, and they're getting a lot of witness testimony in order to just frame out the whole situation. And so George Floyd is kind of walking back and forth. He says that he had no difficulty understanding him when he's on direct examination. So the government is asking him questions, and he's communicating, no, he's about 10 minutes. Manager came out, had conversations. And then at some point, he sort of recognized that what George Floyd paid with for a pack of cigarettes was a counterfeit bill. This was where the whole thing started, right here in this store, because George Floyd allegedly passed over a fake counterfeit $20 bill. And this led to sort of a series of interactions where the store clerk operator went outside, tried multiple times to have conversations with Floyd and the person he was with outside of the store in their vehicle. And we go through this. It was a long line of questioning this morning. And so he walks us through the whole thing. Yes, I talked to my manager. Manager said, go outside. Tell him to come back in the store. Okay, I went outside. I told him to come back in the store. He didn't come back in. All right, go tell him again. And around we go. And then at some point, things escalate, obviously. And so we're going to hear from Mr. Martin as he's describing this counterfeit bill, which is really where it all started. We've all heard this for a long period of time. The 20, how did this all start? What initiated this entire altercation? And it was this moment right here. So let's take a look at it. This is the store clerk. You can see him standing here, and you're going to see George Floyd's not in the frame anymore. The time, you'll notice, is at 7:59 p.m. And then he's basically, the prosecutor is asking him questions, and you're going to see that he picks up a $20 bill and kind of waves it around. So here that is.
Now, if I'm going to freeze it here, I'm sorry. I said
so
I
you
was
see his hand,
run, but we saw you holding something up. Can you describe, and again for the record, this is 7:45:10. Describe for the jurors what you were doing there.
I was holding up the $20 bill that I just received.
And is that something you always do, or something about this?
No, when I saw the bill, I noticed that it had a blue pigment to it, kind of how a $100 bill will have. And I found that odd, so I assumed that it was fake.
Okay. But Mr. Floyd is still there, correct?
Yes.
And you completed the transaction?
Yes.
All right. And then upon doing that, did he leave the store?
Yes.
All right. So now let's let that run, please.
Okay, so they go back into this, and it's actually an interesting story. This young man was was kind of wavering, waffling a little bit. Should I let this go? Should I tell my manager? Because apparently in the store, they had a store policy that if you take somebody's money and it's not legitimate money, then that comes out of your pay. That comes out of your pocket. You got to cover the cost of that. So, he's sort of having this internal debate with himself. Should I tell him? Should I just cover it for him? And they're sort of, the prosecutor reiterates a couple times. So you could understand him, right? I mean, and they're sort of, flushing through this issue, and it's not really relevant to the case in my opinion, right? Ultimately, what this boils down to is the cause of death. None of this really has much to do with the cause of death, but it is laying out the entire scene. And so you're going to notice as we go through this segment today that we've heard from a lot of lay people witnesses. We've heard from just regular civilians kind of walking around. We heard from the firefighter yesterday who was off duty. We heard from the mixed martial artist and other individuals who are just sort of recording bystander videos, and that's it. This is just walking us through the timeline, fleshing out what happened piece by piece. And by the end of this segment today, we're going to be hearing from a lieutenant from a police department who is now going to be transitioning, and he's going to sort of guide us away from some of the bystander video and take us into the formal official videos from the on-body cameras for the different police officers. So that was the prosecutor asking questions about that. This is Eric Nelson now coming back out and doing a cross-examination of this same store witness, asking him more about slurred speech and about his perception about whether or not George Floyd was intoxicated. Because you'll notice if during the direct examination, and I didn't think this was very good for the prosecutors, quite frankly, but they show this for about 10 minutes. So they show this whole scene. And the whole video just played out in court. And what you'll notice, I saw this, the defense attorney asks about this, but the court clerk doesn't confirm it. But you'll notice that George Floyd is sort of walking around. He's kind of pacing up and down here, and he's doing this little dance. Eric Nelson calls it a dance, but it's kind of like a jimmy. He's just kind of like, amped up, or maybe he is dancing. I don't know what he's doing, but he's kind of bouncing around and looking like he's moving erratically. And I noticed that in the video. I don't know if the jurors noticed that. And I don't know if, obviously Eric Nelson, the defense lawyer, noticed it. He asked the court clerk about it, but didn't really kind of spend much time on that. And no, I didn't notice that. I didn't see that. And they just moved on. So, I'm not sure if the jury would have heard that or not, but that would lead to, in my opinion, that would lead the jurors to sort of taking credibility into the statement that we're going to hear next from Mr. Martin, who is saying that he perceived Floyd to be intoxicated back during the original investigation. So let's take a look at that clip here from Mr. Nelson.
You had a pleasant interaction with Mr. Floyd.
Correct.
You were asking him about sports and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
And you formed the opinion that Mr. Floyd was under the influence of something.
Correct.
And you base that on sort of, I think you said, a delay in his speech and response, right?
Correct.
So you were unlike a conversation that we may be having right now, that's rapid, and if you asked him a question, there would be much more of a slowed or delayed response.
Correct.
And I believe in your interviews, you also indicated that he was having some trouble with certain words.
Correct. He was trying to form the words.
Right. So he was delayed in his speech, and you believed him to be under the influence of something.
Correct.
All right. And you were present when your coworker called 911?
Correct.
And do you recall him telling 911 that he appeared to be under the influence?
Correct.
And you had also had, by the time 911 was called, you had two other interactions with Mr. Floyd outside of the car.
Correct.
All right. And so you made the decision after Mr. Floyd handed you this counterfeit $20 bill that you weren't going to call him out on it like you did with the earlier bill.
Correct.
And was that in part because you felt maybe he's under the influence?
Partially. The other person that had come in, it kind of seemed like he was trying to scheme, like he knew it was a fake bill and he was trying to get over. I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill, so I thought I'd be doing him a favor.
Okay, trying to help him out.
All right. So, tough, man. Tough position. Young man, I think he's 18, 17, 19. He's just over the age. Obviously, he's over 18 now, but tough, and there's some language that comes out during, I believe it was his testimony. I could be mistaken about it, but, had I not made a big deal about this, maybe he's still alive and nobody's sitting here today. So very emotional. I mean, the look on his face is, he kind of just looks like he's in pain, and I feel for him, right? Somebody died. he's got a very small part in any of it, but you just kind of let that cascade of guilt just weigh on your shoulders. We all do this, right? We're all kind of guilty of this. What if I had done something differently? Would anything have changed? And so he's going to have to carry that around for some period of time. Now, he's also providing some good information about this case, that he presumed that George Floyd was intoxicated. So did somebody else at the store. And so from a prosecution perspective, I'm thinking, why do you even bring this up? They gotta get some of the backstory in, and there are only certain number of witnesses who can do that. Obviously, that is not a good fact for them, right? And they had to know this was coming out. So they're going to make this, you can see how their strategy's sort of evolving a little bit, where this is not, they have to sort of negate the overdose allegation or minimize the role of drugs or in any intoxicants in this case as much as they can. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the testimony come out about maybe Chauvin was actually digging his knee harder. There's more malice here than we thought. And that's going to explain away it's going to minimize the drugs. They're going to maximize one aggressive component of the defendant, and they're going to minimize some of the bad facts on their case. So this guy, kind of came out, and the jury saw if they saw what I saw on that video, then George Floyd was just kind of bobbing around a little bit and acting erratically. And you know what that feels like, right? When you're in a grocery store or convenience store and somebody's just not behaving quite right. And he looked like that to me. The store clerk, of course, did not notice it or didn't comment to it, but maybe that's because he's used to that type of behavior. But, many people, if somebody's dancing around in the middle of or just bobbing around, just kind of moving around abnormally, you wonder, is that person on drugs? Are they sick? Are they unwell? Do they need help? Are they having a seizure? Are they mentally ill? What's going on? And, I noticed some of that. Be curious if anybody else did. Of course, Eric Nelson did as well. So then we get to our next witness. This guy was very, very interesting today. And he's an older gentleman, and I'm calling him the Nosey Witness, because he admits it. We're going to hear from him in a minute, but he just was kind of driving down the road, and he saw that there was a police car pulled over, something was going on, so he just parked his car, got out, and walked on over to the scene. And the prosecutor's like, well, why'd you do that? Why'd you get out and go poke your nose over there? And he goes, well, I'm nosy. I'm just a nosy guy. So I wanted to see what was going on. And so he's very kind of charming in that regard. He's just very empathetic. I think a likable guy, and you're going to see why that's pretty important here in a minute. So he comes out here. He's wearing his nice glasses, really stand out. He's a memorable witness, and he seems like a very nice and charming guy. This was him. This comes over from the Exhibit 38, which was submitted by the prosecutors today. So he kind of explains that he parked his car. I'm not sure if it was this car or whatever, but he gets out and he's just walking on down the street now. And so he will also be telling us this is why he did that. And this is that clip on why I think this guy's charming. And so there's a little bit, he kind of is struggling with technology a little bit, but this is an important component of criminal cases. You got to remember, it's not just about the facts. It's not just about what somebody says. Somebody can get up there and say, well, there was 11 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl in there, and that's probably what killed George Floyd. Okay, that might be a fact. That might be some toxicologist's opinion. They might have the opposite opinion of that. Who knows? It's irrelevant. But what also matters is how the jurors weigh that person's credibility. Do they believe them? Do they think that they're being sincere? And a lot of that comes through emotion. That's just how we as human beings judge whether a person is being sincere or not, whether they're kind of vulnerable, whether they open that shell up a little bit and let you see inside. It creates that interconnection, that strong bond. And so he's kind of doing that right here. And just by being kind of, a charming old guy, just curious. So let's watch in and see how that went today.
So you were talking about where you were. Using this map that's up on the screen, could you just describe, you can actually use your, there's a little pen there, stylus pen, you can use that to sort of show the jury on the screen where you were and where you were headed.
Hard for me to see because I'm old. I didn't start at Verify Center because I can't hardly see what you're going to do.
Okay.
I was on the corner of 38 in Chicago.
All right.
To make a left to go east towards 47 in Hiawatha. So I was right on the corner of 38th in Chicago.
So you were headed east on 38th Street, is that right?
Yes, which would be right here.
Okay, perfect. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And when you were in action with somebody and some police officers, what did you see at that point?
Well, when I made the left, I seen a blue. There was a Mercedes-Benz truck on the right side with a police officer standing at the door. So I automatic made a right turn and pulled over.
And what made you decide to stop and pull over?
Being nosy, just being nosy. I'm in the neighborhood. I'm a nosy person.
Did you want to know what was going on?
Yes, being nosy. That's what it was.
So when you first approached that area, you said an officer standing next to a blue Mercedes truck.
With the door open.
With the door open. Did you see what the officer was doing at that point?
No, not at the time.
Okay.
All right. So very charming, right? I mean, how can you deny that? And you can almost hear the prosecutor cut off a little bit. You can hear the witnesses or other people in the courtroom kind of snicker a little bit. He says, yeah, I'm nosy. I'm a nosy person. Yeah, I'm a nosy person. And everybody goes, okay, right. So that's pretty funny. It's charming. And it humanizes him a little bit. It sort of disarms people who are watching him, whereas some of the other witnesses that we've seen thus far, they'll come out just with their heels dug in, just right. Every time somebody asks them a question, they're about to just explode, especially if it's the defense lawyer. So this guy comes out just very, amicable, what's the word? Affable, doing a very nice sort of gentle old guy who is just charming and there to help. And that's where this goes into. So now he tells us a little bit more about what he's doing. And this frame comes over there. And the prosecution did a very nice job here. They are superimposing the officer's body camera frame. So there's another officer who's on the inside here. So they take this portion of the video and they basically match it up so that they're in sync. So as this video progresses. Now, I'm not going to play this because, of course, it's a gruesome scene. YouTube flips out about some of that stuff. But you've seen the video. That's this guy that we're talking about. He comes up and he's having a conversation with George Floyd. Right there as all of this is going down. And this looks like it's Chauvin right there sort of looking at each other. Right. And so, this is kind of a new angle. It's a new thing that we had not seen thus far. And he is now going to be telling us what was going on. What was he saying there? What are they talking about? This is him explaining the scene from his perspective. Why was he walking there in the first place? And it's interesting. And I want you to think about this from both sides. Okay. The government is introducing this witness, in my opinion, because he's a very compelling witness. He's going to get emotional, as we're going to see here in a minute. And he's a likable guy. He's charming as hell. And he is somebody who witnessed what he saw. Right. So he's going to come in and tell the story. But at the same time, he's sort of arguing on behalf of the cops. You're going to hear from this conversation that he's having with Floyd. He's basically saying, hey, man, just stand down. It's over, right? You've lost this thing. So just give up and comply. And you're going to hear him say that I was just trying to make it easier on him. Right. And that type of language is dangerous if you're a prosecutor, because now it's sort of framing Floyd as being the unreasonable person. Whether you agree with that or not, it's sort of irrelevant, right? You can, if somebody's saying, hey, man, stop fighting, stop resisting, just let this thing go, and that person doesn't do that, well, why not, right? The argument in law is, what would a standard reasonable person do? We have this guy who just walks down the street, seems like a pretty reasonable guy to me. He's telling Floyd, hey, relax, make it easy, can't win this, just let it go. Floyd doesn't do that. He continues to react, he continues to fight, and the defense is going to have fun with that argument. So here is the nosy old man, the charming guy, explaining what's going on.
Now, just to sort of summarize what's happened thus far, are you having a conversation with Mr. Floyd at that point?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's going on in that conversation?
It's going on a conversation that I'm watching, Mr. Floyd saying he clasped over to the back seat of the police car. And I'm trying to get him to understand that when you make a mistake, once they get you a cup, it's no certain thing as being clasped over. You're going to go with them. And I was trying to get him to go. Okay.
And you were saying, is it your voice saying things like you can't win?
Yes, ma'am.
And why were you saying that?
Because I have had interaction with officers myself, and I understand once you get in the cup, you can't win. You're done. Okay. It's just the way I have looked at it.
So were you trying to just help him to
make the situation easy?
Got it. So you were trying to make the situation easier. And there were some comments about, I'm claustrophobic, and then I believe there was a response. Were you having a conversation with Mr. Floyd at that point in time?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you feel like he was hearing you and understanding what you were saying?
Yes, ma'am.
And like you said, you were just trying to make it easier and help. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So 2 ways to interpret this. Number one, he was trying to calm the situation down. He was acting as a reasonable person. He was trying to communicate to George Floyd. George Floyd, as he just said, heard him, was able to understand him, and still continued to act the way that he did. And I'm not saying that this justifies anything that happened, but I'm just saying that you have a reasonable person on the sidewalk telling George Floyd to calm down. He doesn't. And in fact, he kind of gets a little bit more agitated. We see them try to put him in the back of the car. He flips out the other end of the car, and the rest of that is history. So on the one hand, you have somebody saying, I was trying to calm the situation down. George Floyd was also not doing that against my own advice. And he heard me and he could understand me, and he still was not compliant. So if the officers were trying to be compliant, or trying to get him to be compliant, this guy comes in, tries to get him to be compliant. He's not. What does that leave the officers with? What choice do they have now, right? They have to escalate their use of force. That's how the defense, I think, is going to frame it. Now, kind of converse to that, you could say that this guy is delineating a pattern of police brutality or misconduct or inappropriate behavior with African Americans, right? Because he said specifically, well, I've had interactions with the police. Sounds like he's been in handcuffs before, based on his opinion on how it works. Once you're in handcuffs, the game's over, he said. So if you have, that inclination, okay, well, look, it's not because Floyd did anything wrong. It's not because this was an attempt to make it easier for the officers. This was just a response to this massive, tyrannical, dictator-like police force that is out there ravaging the African-American community. And so I just told him, hey, man, it's a losing battle. Just kind of bend the knee to these oppressors, right? You can interpret it that way. And so, it's kind of a wash at this point during his testimony, whether this is helpful or harmful to the prosecution or to Mr. Chauvin, really, because he's also indicating that Floyd may have been unreasonable just based on the fact that he was also trying to get him to calm down. Again, you can have interpretations on that any which way. But this is where, in this next clip, where this is powerful stuff. So what happens next after this first question that we just covered, they play part of the video where George Floyd is sort of put on the ground, and they watch this. They're just playing the video, the whole thing in court. And then at the end, I don't even think they finished the video. In the middle of the video, this nice, very, very, very charming, reasonable man breaks down in tears right in front of the jury panel. So let's take a look and see what this looks like.
Mr. McGee, do you need a minute?
Oh my God.
You just take your time. Let us know when you're ready.
We'll just give you a moment, Mr. McGee. I'm not sure if there's water for you as well. Oh. If you need a break to get some water, let me know, and we can take a break. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. So Miss Faith just said we had a little hiccup on the stream, but apparently it's back. But so as we could just see, this man was obviously crying in tears, obviously very upset, very traumatic thing that he witnessed. Now he's in court having to testify about it. Very high stress situation. So he breaks down on the stand. Now we're going to talk about an issue here, but I want to just be clear. I do not think that anything that we saw there was not genuine. I believe this guy, right? When I watched that today, I thought this guy's credible as hell. He feels that. I'm not asking him whether he feels that or not, or whether that's justified or unjustified. I think it's justified. I believe him. I empathize with it because a man died. There's no question about that. The issue that we're seeing, and the reason why I'm going to bring it up now, again, this doesn't even apply to his clip, to him specifically, but it's about performative witnesses. It's about witnesses who know that this thing is nationally broadcast, that everybody's talking about it because it's public. We may or may not see some performative witnesses, people who are coming out there and turning it on a little bit for the camera. right? And I didn't bring this up yesterday, but I should have because it was more appropriate when we were talking about the firefighter. Her name was Genevieve Hansen, and she was testifying yesterday, and she was getting very argumentative with Eric Nelson about this. And the judge scolded her before the day was closed, before court ended that day. The judge released the jury and brought her in and then scolded her. But before he did that, he said, Miss Genevieve, we want to make sure we have a word with you. Jury had left the room. What was the first thing that she asked? And I didn't realize this again until I listened to it again. She said, are the cameras off? And the judge said, oh no, they're on. This is on the record. And then he scolds her on the record, and that's all public. And so for that person, now you start thinking, okay, she was asking about the cameras. She wanted to make sure the cameras were off so that she did not get scolded in front of the country. The cameras were obviously not off because this is formal on the record. And so she got scolded anyways. She came back into court today, had a whole different attitude. So that leads one to believe that was a little bit more performative than maybe it would have been had this not been a publicly broadcast trial. So for her, I think maybe that criticism is a little bit more appropriate. And it's still understandable, right? I get it. I'm not trying to poke fun at her. I know she's not a professional at any of this. She's doing what she thinks is right. She's doing what she thinks is best. And this is one of the biggest moments of her life. So she's trying to do the right thing. She's doing what she knows best. The judge recognized that it was not appropriate, and he nudged her back into line. But the point here is that the court needs to keep that order. It needs to keep that demeanor from sort of in control, so it doesn't spiral out of control. So you don't get witnesses like that, because sooner rather than later, what you'll see is the prosecution pointing fingers at the defense. Well, judge, you let their witness get away with this, and you let our witness get away with that, and it kind of turns into a free-for-all. This gentleman is a different situation, right? This is somebody who's breaking down crying in the middle of testifying. What do you do about that? You can't call this guy back into court and scold him. That wouldn't be appropriate regardless. But, you could imagine a situation where somebody is sort of feigning tears or making much ado about nothing. Not appropriate in this case. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but this is kind of an element of criminal law, an element of trials and litigation, even civil litigation, where you just got to be cognizant of what these witnesses are doing and how they're acting. And I know it feels a little bit inhumane even, right? We're seeing a very touching moment with this man. And we're sort of, as a lawyer, you got to be a little bit mechanical about this, kind of take a step back and say, all right, nice performance, or on to the next witness. And so again, I think this guy was totally genuine. I feel for him, but we're asking ourselves this question with all of the witnesses that come out. And now we have a pattern. We had somebody who was argumentative yesterday. We have somebody who's very emotional and sobbing today. We're seeing a lot of emotion in this part of the trial right now. Just keep that in mind. All right. So lastly, we finish off with somebody who's not emotional at all. This is Lieutenant Jeff Rugle, 32 years in whatever law department he's a part of. He is here today as a foundational witness. So he actually works in law enforcement. He wasn't there in May of last year. He's actually somebody who's going to come in and tell us about cameras and about how the data systems work in law enforcement. And what he's doing is he's laying the foundation so that they can get into evidence as exhibits the body camera videos from the officers who were there with George Floyd on that day. And so they can't just, you can't just walk into court and say, hey, Judge, I got this video on a thumb drive. Can we just play this for the jury? No, just cram it in there. All right. Yeah, there you go. Hey, look at that, right? You got to lay foundation. Where did this come from? Who recorded this? How is this stored? What date was this on? Is it encrypted? Who has access to this? Did anybody manipulate the file? Is it the real file? Can we run some analytics on it? Where did it come from? Is there a chain of custody? And on and on and on, right? A lot of issues that you can spot with digital media and the chain of custody and where it was all originated, whether you can even get it admitted as an exhibit in the first place. So this guy comes in and you're going to hear this line of questioning from the prosecutor as they're going through. It's going to sound like kind of very basic questions. Tell me about body cameras. Oh, they're about the size of a deck of cards. Okay. And they attach onto your thing like this. So we got to know that when they do introduce this body camera footage, that somebody can come in and talk about it, tell us where it came from. It's called laying foundation. And so that's what he does. Not that interesting, but it's pretty important from a procedural perspective, because some people may be asking throughout the rest of this trial, well, why can't they talk about that? Or why can't they talk about this thing? Well, it may be because there's no foundation, because nobody can verify or vet that there is anything supporting that claim that you're intending to bring into court. So this is a very, very important part of criminal law, and this guy does it. It's very mechanical, you'll see. Kind of interesting if you don't know anything about body cameras. So let's listen in to Mr. Jeff Rugle.
And then can you tell us a little bit about what these cameras look like and how they're actually physically attached to the officer?
Sure. They're about the size of a deck of cards, a little black rectangle. There's a number of ways to wear them. Most officers use the magnetic mount, which is basically a pretty strong magnet that goes inside the shirt, and then a mounting plate that goes outside the shirt, and then the camera attaches to that mounting plate. So when the magnet is engaged, it's affixed. A lot of them wear it either in their shirt pocket or up on high on the chest, which is where they're supposed to wear it to capture, a view of everything going on in front of them.
Right. And every officer is.
All right. So what he does is he just goes on from there and he says, all right, so every officer has one, and there's a way that you can connect these to the officer. Yeah, there's a serial number. So they check out the camera. It matches their name to the serial number on the camera. Okay. And when they check that out, you have a way of making sure that you can locate what case they were used on, and you have a way of connecting the video file to the case file. How does that work? All right. So what we do is we do this, and then we go into evidence.com, which is the actual website. You download it, upload it, all this stuff. And so then they say, okay, well, how about this? So we know a lot about body cameras now, all of those, all your experience, 32 years, blah, blah, blah. But what about on this case? Were there body cameras in this case? Yeah, in fact, there were. Oh, what were those serial numbers? Oh, here's what they were. Oh, who do they belong to? Those people. Okay. So now we have foundation. Now we know where it came from, what the background is. Then they admit it into evidence, and they played the whole camera. They played the whole thing, right? This was a big day, because they got through that whole video. The jury saw, some of the people on the jury had never seen the video before or claimed they had never seen the video. Well, they did today. It was all out there. There are other angles, and there's going to be more video footage for sure. But this guy, Mr. Rugle, Lieutenant Rugle, was the person who laid the foundation in order to get that admitted as an exhibit. So the jury, they're going to be able, when they're deliberating, to scroll through any of the exhibits. Just the video footage, or they should be able to if the judge will allow that, but they should be able to just sort of manipulate the exhibits or at least get access to them. So this stuff will be seen by the jury panel later down the line, and we're going to see a lot more of this. So we're starting to transition already from layperson witnesses into professional witnesses. We may see more of that tomorrow. I would expect that to start pretty soon. So let's jump into some questions. Great questions typically come from locals.com is the platform. Locals.com. The name of the community is watchingthewatchers.com. I started reading the next question before I even explained where the questions came from. Why would you do that? What a silly goose. All right. So first one comes from JBone86, says, any thoughts on the trash who was caught taking pics in the courtroom? Yeah. So that person should probably be charged with contempt of court. I mean, the judge had some pretty clear guidelines on this. That person was violating the court order. That's contempt of court, and they should be charged with a crime for that. News Now Wyoming says, I was so surprised by how much of the cop body cam was muted. They muted where the cop said he has no pulse, which seems very relevant to the reasonableness of continuing to hold him. Oh, that's interesting. So that is interesting. So I did not even, when they started playing that, I didn't listen to the mutes. I sort of hyper compress this stuff. So I watch it at 2 speed, kind of listen. Oh, okay. There's a good witness coming in. I'll slow it down, listen to them. But when they played the body camera, I didn't listen to it again because I've seen it multiple times. So that's interesting. And we'll see what happens on cross, because when I just sort of wrapped up to come in and do the show, I think they were just finishing with the body camera. So I'm not sure if they got to any cross-examination on that, but certainly they will tomorrow. And it will be very curious if they muted some very relevant information from that video. We got Pato in the house, says, it seems that the media is focusing a lot on the firefighter not being allowed to access Mr. Floyd. But how would the officers at the time know she is who she said she was? If she's not a trained medical professional, she could have done more harm than good. It seems like the defense missed an opportunity to explain why they wouldn't allow her access to Mr. Floyd. Well, so it's a great point. And actually, I made this point on yesterday's show if you missed it, but I haven't seen this else out anywhere. But yesterday, we played the clip of Mr. Nelson cross-examining her, Genevieve Hansen. And she says multiple times, he digs in on this, that if she's using her fire hose or whatever to put out a burning building and somebody comes up and screams at her, that she would not allow them access to her. She wouldn't allow them to deviate her from her duty. She says that multiple times. Well, what if they're screaming at you? Would that distract you? No. I would stay focused on my course. Well, what if they're threatening you? No. I would stay focused. Well, what if it's not one person? What if it's 12 people? No. I would stay focused. What if it's 20 people? And they're saying that they're going to kill you. And she said, well, a burning building is more important than them. So I'm going to be focused on the burning building. And the whole argument there is, well, of course, good for you. This is what the defense should be saying. Yes, we know that. So why were you trying to go and interfere with Derek? He was in that scene. He was the firefighter putting out the building, would be their argument. That George Floyd was somebody who broke the law. They needed to conduct an arrest. He was in the middle of doing that. Anybody who came upon him at the time was interfering with his duty. It wasn't a supervisor, wasn't anybody in uniform. She should absolutely not have access to him. That makes good sense, right? Because he's in the middle of it. And she confirmed that that's a pretty good standard in her own testimony by saying, if somebody were to come up to me, I would not allow them to deviate me from my duty. Okay, well, that's exactly what Chauvin was doing, and you came upon him and tried to deviate him from his duty. And so I think people are sort of missing that whole point. Yeah, she was a random person as far as the cops are concerned. That's what the defense will say. We have Osak, says, Rob, big fan of the show, big fan of you, Osak. So what happens when the witness is someone both sides want to use to help their case? Who gets the first swing with the person? Does this cause any problems for either side? Typically not. These witnesses you usually get witnesses who kind of will side one or the other. There are strategies, though, for using one witness against, using one side's witness against them. So an example that this comes up with a lot is when we have, let's say you have early on in my career, let's say, there were situations where my clients would not be able to afford an expert witness, where they cannot hire somebody who is an expert to come in and testify on their behalf. The expert witnesses in DUI cases are government witnesses because they work for the government. They're the ones testing the blood. So typically the defense will want to hire their own expert witness to come in and testify about the blood results. So if you don't have a defendant who can afford to hire an expert witness, and you're not a public defender, so you don't get public funds for that, or whatever, right? It's a procedural problem. What do? Well, you have to get very good at using the expert witness in your favor. And so you got to get really up to speed about what are they going to testify to? What studies are they going to use? And be prepared with studies that will oppose or will shed light in a different way on the studies that they're sort of leaning on. And so you can prepare for it for both, in both directions. But, really, if it's an absolutely neutral witness, then both sides are going to claw over that person. And you'll see a lot of that come out in cross-examination. And so they both can theoretically call one witness. It just doesn't practically happen that often. Typically, it'll come out one way or the other during a cross-examination. All right, we got Ma Fox in the house. Says, so how do you feel about the cops checking his pulse and noting that he's technically dead, but still not getting off of him? Where do we draw the line of this is too much and you must render aid to those in your custody? Well, I think that's a really bad fact. Yeah, that's a really bad fact. And I'm not, if I can be candid with you, I've not seen it sort of characterized that way. So the cops, and maybe there's a moment, maybe I just missed it, where the cops like check his pulse and say, oh, he's dead and we're not getting off of him. I don't know if that's how that happened, but yeah, that's a problem, right? And this is where this entire sort of manslaughter, depraved mind, something that is so imminently dangerous to other people. There is language in the statutes that Chauvin is being charged under that are saying, it's depraved mind. It's like, yeah, if somebody's dead, right, or their pulse is not there, that's kind of a pretty good trigger or a good sign that maybe you want to inquire into that further. There's no question about that. And so if that's accurate, if they're picking up Floyd's, wrist, nope, he's dead. All right, well, just keep your knee on there in case. I don't feel a pulse or anything. He's not breathing, but just keep it there, right? That is, I think, extremely difficult to explain away to a jury. How do you say that, right? Because the original, I think, justification for not moving is that he is contained and subdued and they're waiting for the EMTs to arrive. But if he is literally dying in front of them, you would expect them to modify their response to try to prevent that from happening. But if this is accurate, like if they knew that he was dying or dead right in front of them and they didn't act, that would be different than if they didn't know. If they didn't know, then you could at least, you got a little bit of gray area there. But if they unequivocally knew, and this is probably going to be something that they fight about, right, Ma? So even if you've got, even if it's framed one way as, hey, we checked his pulse, he's technically dead. Somebody's going to come out and say, no, I couldn't tell. Maybe it was the wrong area. Sometimes you can't catch a pulse. I didn't feel it right. Whatever those little tentacles may be. It's a good question though. And so I've heard a lot about the pulse, but I haven't seen it sort of pinpointed or seen video where he says, oh, he's technically dead, or noting that he's technically dead. That's not good. We have Sharon Quidney says, I'm not sure about this, but can a person get in trouble for interfering with police officers? Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, it's called obstruction of justice. If so, and if the cops were totally out of line, why didn't this fellow get in trouble? So you must be talking about the old fellow. Yeah, there it is. Why didn't he get in trouble? Well, I don't think he was. There are different tiers of interference, right? So just coming by and say, what's going on here? Are the cops going to arrest everybody who does that? No, they'd be arresting every bystander for every type of public crime. But it's when somebody is, if a cop gives you a lawful order, hey, stand back, put your phone down, stop recording, if that is lawful in your state or whatever the rules are. But if they give you an order, go sit down over there, and you refuse, then at that point in time, the cops may say, all right, enough of this already. You're getting charged with a crime too. They can call it obstruction of justice, failure to obey a lawful order. We have those here in Arizona. We have a lot of cities that also have their own versions of those orders. So there are a lot of things that a cop can do, but in this case, probably just didn't think it was justified. We have Ma Fox says, falsifying evidence is a serious crime. I highly doubt the prosecution was that careless. Yeah, so that's a good point about the muting. I can't imagine they did that. They may have muted it for the audio, maybe for us listening. If there was any information, I don't know what they would mute though. Yeah, so I would take a look at that. Fact check any of these comments. Okay. These are live questions. So, just go look it up for yourself, right? That's, I think, a pretty good rule in general. Not that we don't trust anybody here. These are all locals. These are all people from locals. These are the most estimable people on the internet, quite frankly. I mean, just outstanding A+ level people. So go over there if you want to hang out with some of those folks. We got Hack Consulting in the house that says, if that firefighter is so concerned with the burning building to not be concerned with idiots around her, then she's only there for a paycheck and doesn't care about anything except looking good in a uniform. A good firefighter cares about everything going on in the situation. And if idiots are intruding on cops, people die. Yeah. So yeah, she was digging her heels in because she felt like that was the right thing to do, but I don't think it served her well. And honestly, I'm not real sure that Eric Nelson knows that. He may have been going a different direction on how to utilize that by saying, by wanting her to answer that, yes, I would have been thrown off guard on that, and then maybe adjusted the response accordingly. We have J-Bone again says, should the prosecution be worried about desensitizing the jury by playing videos of George Floyd over and over again? Seems it was an issue in the Rodney King trial. Yeah, maybe. So, Robert Barnes, who we've had on this channel, he was commenting today, good observation about how emotional a lot of these witnesses have been. A lot of emotion, a lot of tears, a lot of crying, a lot of anger, a lot of animosity, a lot of people very upset about that. But none of that really answers the question about cause of death. Drugs, asphyxiation. Drugs, cardiac arrest. What was it? Right, all of this is all nice, but it doesn't answer the question about what killed him. And so, jurors might get sick of it. They may get sick of seeing it. We've seen, how many times can you see a man die in front of you before you get to the real issue? It's like, hey, I've had enough appetizers. Give me the meal. Let's get down to brass tacks here. What really happened? And so if you sort of, have your nose rubbed in it, in the same horrific scene over and over again, people might instinctually react to that. NY Renal MD says, I couldn't hear anything that mentioned the pulse when they checked. Only they could say what it was. Could the other cops be called by the defense? Theoretically, yes, but they would all, I would guess, refuse to testify, right? Because it's not their trial. They have a right against self-incrimination. They have a right not to testify. And if they were forced to testify in this case, they could say something that might jeopardize their case. And so I don't think that they would be required to testify. But it's a good point. Yeah, and I don't think that would happen. We got Woodworking Medic says, with the whole pulse check thing and not letting go, we take patients that are completely paralyzed and sedated, but PD will still handcuff them to the stretcher. Blows my mind. Yeah, it's like, hey, right? You see in those movies where like a guy's in a coma with like his head wrapped up in like a million bandages and he's like strapped to the thing. You're like, he's not going anywhere, folks. But you never know. And so it's better safe than sorry, I guess, is the general rule when it comes to law enforcement. So good questions on that. That's it for the Derek Chauvin trial. We'll be back here tomorrow with more coverage, of course. So make sure you subscribe. If you want to join and support the show, check us out over at locals.com. Our community is called Watching the Watchers. All right. So we'll change gears again. Matt Gaetz is in the news. This guy is in a situation. That's all I can call it right now. He is the situation, if you want to go that route. He is facing a Justice Department inquiry, an investigation over sex with an underage girl. This New York Times story came out, and everybody's kind of scratching their heads about it. Simultaneously to this story coming out, Matt Gaetz is out responding to it, saying, oh, no, this has nothing to do. This is all basically a bunch of malarkey. And I'm actually involved in an extortion scheme for over $20 million. My father was going to wear a wire and go out these people who are orchestrating this entire scheme. What? Like, is this a movie? Is this a Netflix series? So this was all happening late last night, and this story was also posted over by the New York Times. So we're going to go through it. We're going to go through the original story, some of the original allegations. We're going to take a look at Matt Gaetz. We're going to review what happened on Tucker Carlson last night. Weird interview. And we're going to get some response and some reaction from other people out there on Capitol Hill, other people who are part of this power structure, because we have a potential for criminal charges in many directions, not only against potentially Representative Matt Gaetz, who's a congressperson, by the way. I didn't even mention that. And somebody who he is claiming is behind the extortion scheme, which is a former U.S. attorney somewhere, I think it was the First Circuit, one of these circuits. So a lot of finger pointing going on. It's going to be interesting. Let's get into it. This is from the NewYorkTimes.com, posted late last night. Says Matt Gaetz is said to face a Justice Department inquiry over sex with an underage girl, written by Michael Schmidt, Katie Benner, and Nicholas Fandos. So Rep. Matt Gaetz of Florida, close ally to Trump, is being investigated by the Justice Department over whether he had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and paid for her to travel with him, according to 3 people briefed on the matter. Investigators are examining whether Gaetz violated sex trafficking laws, a variety of federal statutes that make it illegal to induce someone under 18 to travel over state lines. Justice Department regularly prosecutes these cases. Not clear how Gaetz met the girl. She was 17, believed to be 17 at the time, about 2 years ago. Investigation was open in the final months of the Trump administration under William Barr, the 2 people said. Gaetz's profile: senior Justice Department officials in Washington, including some appointed by Trump, were notified of the investigation. 3 people said that the examination of Mr. Gaetz, who's 38 years old, is part of a broader investigation into a political ally of his, a local Florida man named Joel Greenberg, who was indicted last summer over an array of charges, including sex trafficking of a child and financially supporting people in exchange for sex, at least one of whom was an underage girl. And so you can kind of see where that's going, right? If Matt Gaetz's friend is in trouble for this type of stuff, well, obviously you can just presume Matt Gaetz is involved in it. Sort of that guilty by association. So that's where that story is going. We also are going to finish that up. We have here Mr. Greenberg, who has since resigned his post as a tax collector, visited Gaetz in 2019. So it's sort of guilt by association. No charges have been brought against Mr. Gaetz, and the extent of his criminal exposure is unclear. So he gets the presumption of innocence, just like everybody should. Matt Gaetz said in an interview that his lawyers had been in touch with the Justice Department and that they were told he was the subject, not the target of an investigation. He said, quote, "I only know that it has to do with women." So he wants to get clear about that. "I have a suspicion that someone is trying to recategorize my generosity to ex-girlfriends as something more untoward." In a second interview later on Tuesday, Congressman said he had no plans to resign his seat, denied having romantic relationships with minors. It is verifiably false that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, he said. Representatives for the Justice Department and FBI declined to comment, as did the U.S. Attorney's Office in California. Greenberg, his friend, pled not guilty last year. Frequent presence on Fox News and others. He recently mused with confidants about quitting elected politics and taking a full-time job with Newsmax or another network, according to Accuses, which is a very interesting timing, right? If you sort of know that, hey, maybe you're about to be federally indicted, maybe it's a good time to transition and go take a job in a different line of work, which is what a lot of the speculation is saying. And so, of course, Mr. Gaetz is a big public figure, somebody who deserves the presumption of innocence, and so we're going to afford him that, but we are going to continue to go through this. So here is his response. Mr. Gaetz, over the past several weeks, my family and I have been victims of an organized criminal extortion involving a former DOJ official seeking $25 million while threatening to smear my name. We've been cooperating with federal authorities in the matter, and here is something else he said, posted by Jonathan Swan. I have definitely in my single days provided for women I've dated. I've paid for flights, for hotel rooms. I've been, generous as a partner. I think someone is trying to make that look criminal when it's not. So he's a generous guy. Who isn't a generous person out there? That's not bad. So let's take a look here. Now, Matt Gaetz says he's under federal investigation for sexual misconduct. Of note, he said in a later statement released Tuesday night that they've been victims of organized criminal extortion, seeking $25 million while threatening to smear my name. We've been cooperating with the FBI and federal authorities. My father has been wearing a wire at the FBI's direction to catch these criminals. Wow. The planted leak to the New York Times tonight was intended to thwart that investigation, says Gaetz. No part of the allegations against me are true, and the people pushing these lies are targets of the ongoing extortion investigation. I demand the DOJ immediately release the tapes made at their direction, which implicate their former colleagues in crimes against me based on false allegations. Whoa. So he's saying that maybe this DOJ investigation, this indictment that may be forthcoming, the allegations that he was sex trafficking or whatever those were with a 17-year-old years ago was an effort to discredit him before they got caught from the sting operation that his father was involved in. Is this real life? What are we talking about here? So this is an interesting story. He was on Tucker Carlson last night. We have some clips of this. I think we've got 4 clips. We're going to see which ones we've got here. But Tucker, this is a weird interview. So Tucker last night says, all right, well, this story is just breaking. Bump somebody, get him off, see if Matt Gaetz will come on. Matt Gaetz comes on. Nobody knows anything about what's happening because the story was just breaking. A lot of these responses and clips are sort of coming out of this interview. And so this was taking place last night. Let's listen in and see what we've got here.
What the truth is from your perspective.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away. Our family was so troubled by that, we went to the local FBI. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence and that will show that these allegations aren't true. They're merely intended to try to bleed my family out of money. And this former Department of Justice official tomorrow was supposed to be contacted by my father so that specific instructions could be given regarding the wiring of $4.5 million as a down payment on this bribe. I don't think it's a coincidence that tonight, somehow, the New York Times is leaking this information, smearing me, and ruining the investigation that would likely result in one of the former colleagues of the current DOJ being brought to justice for trying to extort me and my family.
What? So he's basically saying this is like a scene out of House of Cards or one of these political thrillers. In other words, Dad today was supposed to go and meet with the guy who was extorting them for $25 million. They were going to have instructions communicated today about where to transfer $4 and change million from the Gaetz family over to these extortionists. And lo and behold, the day before that meeting is supposed to happen, there's this story that gets leaked over to the New York Times. Somebody picks up the phone, calls the New York Times, says, "Hey, listen to this." They publish a story. You know, we don't know what the source is. I think we've got some clips on the author who drafted the story, but very interesting timing, isn't it? Just all sort of bubbles up. Now you can look at this from both angles. You can say that, oh well, you know, this is Matt Gaetz trying to get ahead of the ball by saying, well, you know, oh, this indictment's coming. Oh, we're just going to go and we're also involved in an extortion scheme. Maybe it has nothing to do with anything, but it's just good timing. It's a weird coincidence. And so he's going to be, you know, sort of bolstering this up to say that what otherwise could have been a legitimate investigation from the DOJ is really not legitimate. It's biased. So he's trying to taint the well, as it were. Whereas the other, he's making the claim to the exact opposite, that he was about to unveil this big explosive story that incriminates former members of the DOJ in this bizarre $25 million extortion scheme for a federal congressperson. And now he's, you know, what is going on? This is a weird story. And so the question is, like, who do you believe on some of this stuff? Matt Gaetz comes out. He's very specific. He's got some pretty, you know, compelling language there. Says, well, my father was involved, going to wear a wire tomorrow. We actually went to the FBI. This is a family problem. And Tucker's just doing his thing, going, the thing he does at the camera. What the hell is going on right now? And so we've got some more clips. Here is Gaetz calling out somebody by name, David McGee.
First of all, who is this Department of Justice former employee who's trying to extort the money from you, you say?
His name is David McGee. He was a top official in the leadership in the Northern District of Florida as a prosecutor. He currently works at the Beggs and Lane law firm. As a matter of fact, one of the recordings that was made at the FBI and Department of Justice request occurred at that law firm. And the money that was supposed to be paid today that would have shown even more evidence of David McGee's work in this extortion scheme, that was foiled by the New York Times story. And I believe that's why this horrible information and these terrible allegations have been used this evening. So name, rank, phone number, address. I mean, he almost gave you everything for that guy. This is where he works, at this law firm, this is what he does. So, you know, before you go out there on a public station like Tucker's, which has one of the biggest audience is, I think, in cable news, you got to be pretty clear about your facts, because those might be defamatory statements. I mean, he might be exposing himself to all sorts of criminal liability. So you're going to be pretty clear before you go out there and make a big statement like that. So you presume that, hey, he knows what he's doing, and maybe there is, in fact, something there, but who knows? We have another clip. Let's see what this one is.
Was motivated by greed. He was trying to extort money from your family. That's his motivation, you're saying?
I know that there was a demand for money in exchange for a commitment that he could make this investigation go away along with his co-conspirators. They even claimed to have specific connections inside the Biden White House. Now, I don't know if that's true. They were promising that Joe Biden would pardon me. Obviously, I don't need a pardon. I'm not seeking a pardon. I have not done anything improper or wrong. But what I am troubled by is the real motivation for all of this. You know, just tonight, Ted Lieu, a Democrat, is calling on me to be removed from the House Judiciary Committee. And I believe we are in an era of our politics now, Tucker, where people are smeared to try to take them out of the conversation. I'm not the only person on screen right now who's been falsely accused of a terrible sex act. You were accused of something that you did not do. And so you know what this feels like. You know the pain it can bring to your family. And you know how it just puts people on defense when you're accused of something so salacious and awful. But it did not happen. It is not true. And the fact that it is the basis of this attempt to extort my family tells a lot. And if the FBI and Department of Justice will release the tapes that they are in possession of, the American people will see what is really going on.
You just referred to a mentally ill viewer who accused me.
All right, so we didn't finish the rest of that clip, but Tucker Carlson, he comes out, and this is where this interview got weird a little bit. You saw some of that. You didn't see Tucker's reaction. I'll fill you in on it. Basically, he finishes that, and he says, yeah, you know that sexual assault allegation you were talking about? That was from a mentally ill viewer from 20 years ago who didn't even watch the show or something, right? He goes on. It was totally not even remotely close to anything credible. And so as I'm watching this is the first time this happens. This happens again. It might be in the next clip, maybe not. I don't know. But he's basically, Matt Gaetz is trying to cozy up to Tucker. He's trying to kind of, throw the hula hoop around him. Get in here, boy. We've been in this thing together. We've been through something like this. You've got somebody make false allegations against you. I've got somebody making false allegations against me. You know how hard this is. Tucker comes back and goes, no, I don't. Mine is not like yours. All right. So don't lasso me into this rodeo there, cowboy. This is your bag, not mine. We're not kindred spirits here. And he goes on and he kind of just, Gaetz is like, come on over here. And Tucker's just like, no, go away. And he does that again in another clip. Maybe this is it. We'll see. But it's a weird thing because he also says to Tucker that, well, let's see what we got here.
You say that it was or is underway. There was an investigation. What is the basis of that investigation? What is the allegation? That's really not very clear from these news stories.
Yeah, again, I only know what I've read in the New York Times. I can say that actually you and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there, and I brought a friend of mine. You'll remember her. And she was actually threatened by the FBI, told that if she wouldn't cop to the fact that somehow I was involved in some pay-for-play scheme, that she could face trouble. And so I do believe that there are people at the Department of Justice who are trying to smear me, providing for flights and hotel rooms for people that you're dating who are of legal age is not a crime. And I'm just troubled that the lack of any sort of legitimate investigation into me would then convert into this extortion attempt.
I don't remember the woman you're speaking of or the context at all, honestly. But I would like to know who. So they're saying there is a 17-year-old girl.
All right. So again, you saw that happen. Hey, oh yeah, Tucker, you know her, right? The 17-year-old girl we had dinner with, you and your wife, Tucker. I have no idea what you're talking about, but anyways, it's 17-year-old, and she just kind of rolls with the interview. He comes back later. We might have a clip of that, but he says that was the weirdest interview that I've ever done. It was weird. It felt like they were trying to be buddy-buddy, or that Gaetz was trying to be buddy-buddy with him, and it just didn't land. Tucker was not having that. Just, wanted to get to the nuts and bolts of it. And interesting stuff. So now we have some reaction from other people around the interwebs. This is over from Scott Dworkin. Says that Matt Gaetz is accusing David McGee of crimes. McGee is the former first assistant at U.S. Attorney's Office and was lead attorney for a U.S. DOJ organized crime task force. He received honors from the Secret Service and even a special commendation from the FBI director. Well, does anybody have really faith in any of those organizations or institutions anymore? I don't. So, yeah, I understand what he's doing. He's trying to say, well, look at all these credentials this guy's got. All right, it's the U.S. Department of Justice. Big deal. What are they? They can't even handle 250 cases that come out of nowhere on January 6th. Oh, everything's melting down in D.C., so they're useless. The FBI gets, laptops filled with potential criminality. They sit on it for a year. And who else do we've got? U.S. DOJ. No, I covered them all. Oh, Secret Service. I don't have much complaints about them. Other than the fact that it sounds like they may have just covered up for Hunter Biden from a prior case where he threw a gun in a trash can. So there you go. A lot of faith in those institutions. Here is a former DOJ official accused of extorting Matt Gaetz. He says he denies the allegations. His name is David McGee. He was a top official, says Gaetz. McGee is a partner at the Pensacola, Florida law firm Beggs & Lane, where he practices both criminal and civil litigation. He previously served as the first attorney assistant, lead attorney, blah, blah, blah. McGee said the extortion allegations were a blatant attempt to distract from the fact that Gaetz is apparently about to be indicted for sex trafficking of underage girls, according to the Daily Beast. And so you can see where this is going, right? Gaetz is saying, no, I'm coming out first because we were about to just blast David McGee for extorting our family for $25 million. David McGee comes out and says, no, this is just a distraction because we were just about to indict him, or he wasn't. He's not at the DOJ anymore. He's at Beggs & Lane, but the DOJ was just about to indict him. So everybody's trying to jump the gun first. Let's take a look over from New York Times reporter Katie Benner told MSNBC's Rachel Maddow that while Gaetz may be the victim of an extortion plot, she stands by her reporting on the DOJ investigation. She is bylined on the New York Times article that we covered. She explains the timeline of the investigation and how Gaetz' claim of extortion, how it fits into the plot. So, yeah, we'll get there in a minute. But the point is, these things could be connected or they could be totally separate. Right? Gaetz really could be being extorted, and he also could be about to be indicted for whatever. Those things could be running in parallel, and they're just sort of bubbling up at the same time, and Gaetz is using it, one to sort of mute the other. Or they could be exactly connected. One is bubbling up in order to take pressure off of the other. Who knows? We're going to find out, but let's listen in here.
Let me ask you first about Congressman Gaetz's pushback. I know that the story published initially, you and Michael Schmidt published an initial version of the story, and then there was fairly quickly an update to account for Congressman Gaetz really angrily denying all of this and making counter allegations that this is all the product of some sort of improper extortion plot. Can you help us understand what his pushback is here?
Sure. I think that to understand the congressman's statements, the most important thing to do is to look at the timeline in this investigation. What we found is that this investigation began at the end of last summer, and it's been going on for more than 6 months. So this is a serious investigation that was serious enough that even the highest levels of the Justice Department, including the Office of the Attorney General, Bill Barr, said that that it should continue. So that's the context. And this investigation, after going on for several months, what Congressman Gaetz is saying is that somebody then found out about it and used that information to try to get money out of his family. So I'm not saying that the extortion claims that he's making are untrue. I'm just saying that it came on the heels of months and months of an investigation in a part of the country where the offices are very small, and there should be some expectation that information does sometimes leak out of these offices. So the idea that the extortion exists or that it happened, I think that it should be seen in the context of that timeline of an investigation that's serious, brewing for a long time, bubbling out into the local community.
Yeah, so that actually does clarify some stuff for us. So I think that's valuable. So rather than this being totally unrelated, the extortion plot is related to the underlying sexual investigation, but it's not. It's sort of a consequence. It's coming out of the original investigation. So the investigation is taking place. That is all separate. It's in its own little silo. They are investigating Matt Gaetz. Somebody, presumably who's a part of that investigation with the Justice Department, as that investigation is going on, we're kind of driving down that road, they take a little piece of that. They say, we know about this. They go over to Matt Gaetz, say, hey, look, we can help you get out of this thing. We are going to try to extort you in order to get that done for the $25 million. So they are working with the FBI to go and investigate that. But that doesn't necessarily negate the underlying investigation, right? It's a crime. It's a bad crime that's on top of the other investigation. But it doesn't sound like, from what this reporter is saying, that it negates the underlying investigation. It's not. The investigation kind of stands on its own. This is something that is a separate loop. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Let's take some questions over from locals.com/watchingthewatchers or watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Great place to be. Ask some questions. Participate in the show. Don't just sit there. Participate. All right. We've got Sharon Quidney says the presumption of innocence for not only a Republican, but a Trump supporter. Oh, really? Give me a break. Yeah, that's not going to happen. That doesn't typically happen. We got News Now Wyoming says, as much as I love a free press, there needs to be protections out there to stop this kind of crap. Libel is too hard for a public person to get protection from. If there are pics, include them in the effing story. Without the pics, you are lying. Yeah, so big. Pics or there's an internet meme on that, right? Pics or, So yeah, it's a good, right? It's a good comment. There is a lot of this going on. There's a lot, look, this one is hard to judge one way or the other because these are insane claims going both directions, but we live in insane times now. This is Hack Consulting says, we watched this last night on Rakieta's Law live stream from Florida. I mean, I think the biggest issue here is that there was political points trying to be made and not actually get 25 mil or $4.5 million from the Gaetz family. It's so damn crazy. I think he's speaking truthfully. Thankfully, I don't care. I'll let time bring more things out. Hopefully Gaetz has the tapes. I would never release them, but I would rather the feds do it so they can take the blame for the consequences. Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, if everybody's got tapes And the FBI was sort of involved on both ends. Presumably they're involved in the underlying investigation, plus this extortion claim. Wild stuff. Jeremy Matrita says he should have also recorded the calls to cover himself in case the FBI doesn't come forward with the recordings. I think it's a very good point, Jeremy. Yeah. And I saw a headline, a very dangerous thing out there that I saw a headline about it, something to the effect that the father, Gaetz' father, was on recordings saying damning things, coached by the FBI in order to induce the other party to enter into an illegal transaction, right? So if you're going to go and you have to, if you're an undercover person, you got to engage in some sort of criminality, right? To convince the other person to also engage in that criminality with you. But what if the FBI just comes out and says, hey, no, he wasn't working for us. He wasn't undercover. They were actually going to do this illegal thing. Not good. We got Liberty or Death says, Tucker is politicking. He knows where this is going. He has seen what has happened with Me Too and is trying to create distance. I also love how they are trying to create credentials for people. Check out Bill Clinton doing an empowering women event with VP Kamala. Why not? I mean, he used to be AG, then governor and president. Yeah. Yeah, that's hysterical. We've got Kamala Harris, who says believe all women, but then turned and ran away when those claims were against Joe Biden. Sitting down with Bill Clinton to talk about empowering women. Oh, it's like a bizarro world. We got Norovirus says, anyhow, Robert Gruler, the entire media is attacking Rep. Gaetz. What can he say to defend himself when he is crucified in all the main media channels? Well, look, I don't think Gaetz has any problem with that. I think he's very, very comfortable in this arena. We see he's somebody who just goes right into it, which is a good quality if you're going to be facing these allegations. Now, that being said, legal advice is to not say anything, right? He shouldn't be doing any of those interviews. I don't think he's going to take that advice because he's also a politician. But, you know, you have to think about this from different angles. Okay, if you have a problem and you take that problem to somebody, they're going to identify a solution that is most within their skill set, naturally speaking. Okay, and so the example that I use on this is with doctors. Hey, my back hurts. All right, well, what happens? Well, you go to your doctor. He says, oh, you're too fat, lose some weight. Okay, that's your general doctor. You go to another doctor who's a bone doctor. He says, oh, it's your bones. You know, take some calcium. You go to a chiropractor. Oh, no, you need to be cracked every 2 weeks. All right, go to the chiropractor. You go to the naturopath. They say, oh, take more vitamins. Your magnesium levels are off. All right. So every single person you go to, they're going to identify a problem. The kidney guy is going to say it's your kidneys that are not working. The brain guy is going to say it's something miswiring in your brain, and the psychologist will say it's all in your head. So they're all going to identify their solution because it sort of is birthed out of their skill set. Here, it's going to be the same answer. From a criminal defense lawyer, anytime somebody's under investigation for a crime, it's obvious. You don't say a thing. You say nothing. That's the solution. Okay, we do the talking for you. You shut your mouth, and that's it. And that's a hard rule. Now, that would be my answer for Mr. Gaetz, but I'm also not a politician. And so he has a political advisor or a public relations advisor or a media person. He knows that he's got multiple things that he needs to weigh. And this happens a lot, right? Somebody will come in and say, hey, my boss is investigating me about, missing money. And so, well, what do you want to do about this? Do you want to talk to the boss and maybe save your job, but potentially incriminate yourself by having a conversation? Or do you want to protect yourself from potential incrimination, but almost virtually guarantee that you lose your job by not having that conversation? So you got to weigh out these priorities. From my perspective as a criminal defense lawyer, very easy. Stop talking. But he's probably not going to do that because he's got other considerations like being a politician, getting reelected, and his whole career kind of hinges on this case. And so it's a different analysis for a politician. They have to be cognizant of those other things that might impact their careers. Next up, we've got Jeremy says, where is the investigation into the congressman on the intelligence committee who the FBI already knew he was sleeping with a Chinese spy? Nothing ever equal. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Swalwell. Eric Swalwell. Whatever happened with that one? Nothing. We have Liberty or Death says, isn't it amazing that right when it was getting heated, the allegation for Gaetz comes out and no one cares about Rep. Eric Sir farts a lot. Swalwell. You got names, Liberty, today. You got some names. You got Swalwell was caught in a honeypot by a Chinese spy. I agree with News Now. Congress should pass a bill or a new case that brought up by SCOTUS to overturn the New York Times versus Sullivan to sort of make some additional penalties on libel or defamation. So, yeah, it is interesting. Look, just like everything's going to have a political bend. Everything is political ammunition these days. Everything is weaponized. Media, government, even commerce. Can't even go into a grocery store without, you can't go buy a banana without having politics crammed in your face in the form of something. All right, so last question. Chairman of the board says, I'm not taking Gaetz' side on this. He comes off as shady, especially in his Tucker interview, but I don't think having a 17-year-old girlfriend, although creepy AF at his age, is illegal. It probably is, depending on the state. It's probably illegal. Although I don't recommend it. My sister got married at 17. I don't think this is a situation people think of when they say sex trafficking. Gaetz Gate. Hashtag Gaetz Gate. And I saw you on Twitter, Chairman of the board, saying that that you wanted, you like that term. It's a good term. Gaetz Gate. I think it's quite clever. Yeah, Matt Gaetz, look, he's an interesting character for sure. I don't have a lot of love for him in particular. I've had some concerns with some of the things that he did. I've said that on the show, right? And I don't necessarily disagree with him on a personal level, I wouldn't say, but I think that he's somebody who is playing a part and he knows this. So I've listened to him on Clubhouse a few times. And in my opinion, he's sort of like the rights version of AOC, right? She's somebody out there making a lot of noise, talking a lot of things, saying a lot of stuff, but some of it's kind of a little bit more red meat. It's just like, oh, that's juicy. That's stuff that gets me fired up. That's aggressive language. And people like that. They respond to that. But I just don't know how useful it is. Are they taken serious as real policy people who are actually going to solve some problems in this country? I don't know. But I think he recognizes that. He knows that this is almost a shtick a little bit. And he said so on Clubhouse, that sometimes he gets provocative in order to rile up attention, to generate attention. And I think one of my original criticisms of him was when he was being a little bit, I would say, overly lacking in concern as it relates to COVID. He was just out there sort of dancing and right in the middle of it. And I thought it was the bad session, the bad message to send during that time. But that doesn't mean that he should be indicted for sex crimes unless there's some pretty serious evidence here. So we'll see where this goes. New York Times is reporting it. She obviously sounds like she's pretty assured of her reporting. So we'll continue to follow this along, see where it goes. So make sure you join us and subscribe for that. All right, last segment of the day. Joe Biden plans a $2.25 trillion spending bill and corporate tax hikes. Well, we already knew this was coming. We knew this was coming for a long period of time. And here it is. It's on our doorstep today. There was a big announcement sort of fleshing out what this policy proposal looks like. Just want to remind you that we already just signed a $1.8 trillion COVID bill. And it looks like there's going to be another several $1 trillion bill coming out, I think, in April. The end of April. So we're just writing checks right now. It's the new year. It's the new 2021. We got a new administration in house. Everybody gets whatever they want. Just go ask Uncle Joe for it. So this story came over from Bloomberg.com, says President Joe will unveil a $2.25 trillion infrastructure plan on Wednesday. That's today. So this has been unveiled now. Paid for by what? Tax hikes on businesses that his administration said will prove the most sweeping since investments in the 1960s space program. 4-part, 8-year plan dedicates $620 billion for transportation, doubling of the federal funding for public transit. $650 billion for initiatives tied to improving the quality of life at home, like clean water, high-speed broadband, which is good. That's really good. Broadband's good because, as Joe Biden told us, there are, especially in rural areas, minorities who have difficulty getting on the internet. So that will be good that they'll be able to get on the internet as a result of this spending bill. There's $580 billion in strengthening American manufacturing, some $180 billion of which goes to the biggest non-defense research and development program on record, another $400 billion to address improved care for the elderly and people with disabilities. It's a lot of money, a lot of billions going on there. What lays out Wednesday is going to be part of the long-term economic program. with a second round of initiatives to be announced mid-April. There it is. So we're going to get one in March. We'll get another one of these. We'll come back and do this all again, spend more money in April. Those will focus on helping families with challenges like healthcare costs, childcare, and education. Wow. The program will prove far more complex to enact than the 1.9 trillion. I said 1.8, my bad. I was off by 1/10 of a $1 trillion. So let me correct that. 1.9 trillion for pandemic relief signed earlier in March. Republicans are staunchly opposed to tax increases. The breadth of the measures will invite partisan and even internal Democratic battles. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said Wednesday it's like a Trojan horse that's called infrastructure. But inside the Trojan horse is going to be more borrowed money and massive tax increases on all of the productive parts of our economy. Yeah, and this is accurate. So, I've said this on the show. I'm a part of a networking group. There are different networking groups with a lot of, very high earners, people who are very, very prolific in the world. You would know many of these people, buy their products, use their services. And I am a tiny little minnow at the bottom rung in this group. And it's been very good for me. I've learned a lot, how to be a better entrepreneur, how to be a better person, how to be a better son and brother, and those types of things, and how to provide a higher level of service in our business, how to motivate a team, build a team, live your passion, go out there and conquer the world and leave the world a better place, move the needle a little bit. A lot of people don't really recognize the sort of the culture in a lot of these groups. And this is one group of many of these that exist throughout the country. When this stuff happens, when taxes go up, it's not these people that are typically hurt by it. Okay. They have massive financial advisors. They have these they're called family home offices where they have entire teams of people moving money around. The tax increases to them, it's like, okay, this is annoying. But they move stuff around. And in fact, people will even move. Okay, they have multiple homes. They just change their place of residence from one building to another or from one state to another. This happens all day, all the time. And so people will pass a bunch of taxes and they'll say, well, why the hell did the gears of this country just kind of stop working? Why is the economy coming to a halt? You have all of these economic advisors and people coming out there and saying, well, look, if we spend 1.9 trillion, if we put $1 in the machine, we're going to get $2 back out of the machine. It doesn't work like that. So I can tell you that from people that I have conversations with who are watching what's happening and they're making moves strategically. And people might sit out there and go, well, those are just racist white bigots who hate America. No, that's not it. It's a pretty diverse group. It's very, very diverse and everybody's doing their part, but they don't see improving America as paying more taxes. They see it as building a business and hiring more employees. Taxes make that job harder to do. So we just read that this is going to be on the back of small businesses. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to make it more hard for them. It's not okay. This is a big problem. And we're going to feel it. You're going to feel it, whether you know it or not. It might feel good. This might feel good that they're going to roll back those Trump tax plans and, oh, those rich people, they have too much. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, who actually, by the way, tend to hawk the liberal ideals more than anybody out there. But they are the enemy, this class warfare stuff. And guess what? It's going to trickle back down to everybody. And this is the first time I've always sort of railed against taxes because of the labor theory that I think is instructive for all of us, that taxes are stealing a form of your life. If the government is taxing you, what they're doing is literally taking a part of your labor. Why is that? It's because every day you get up and go to work, you are transferring your labor into productive utility. You're getting compensated for that. So you're turning your time, your life, hours of your day, you're mixing it with something, with your mind, with some tasks in front of you, with some wood, building a house. Okay, you're mixing your labor with the world and you're creating something of value. You're turning your life into value. The government taking 30% off the top of that. So just go down the chain. They're taking a portion of your life. You're paying a part of your life to the government. So on a foundational principle level, I have a huge problem with taxes for that reason. I understand that they're a necessary evil in many situations, but when we start talking about healthcare costs, childcare, education, we're talking about all of these different things, which are nice in theory. I want all children to have healthcare. I want all children to have education. I want good things for society. But when you take it, when you fund that on the backs of the people who are the gears of this country, and you take away their ability to go out and create more business, hire new people, create more value, mix their labor with the world and create value, the government just takes that and just rips it right off of them. For public transit, quality of life at home, clean water, high-speed broadband, the government's going to get involved in all this stuff rather than private enterprise and the free market. So this stuff is troubling. It's going to impact everybody, whether you know it or not. You might feel good. You might feel like, yeah, good, we're going to raise those taxes on all those rich people. Well, it's not going to work out. All right, here's exactly how the $2 trillion infrastructure spending breaks down. He's going to officially announce a $2 trillion jobs plan, major investments, transportation, housing, climate change policies. So that's good. He plans to offset the spending with a plan on corporate tax. $2 trillion focused on job creation, traditional infrastructure, spending, investment, and many other things that stand to redefine infrastructure as a political issue, such as funding care for workers, as well as incentives for childcare to be provided at American workplaces. He wants to couple it with a tax increase for corporations meant to offset the bill's spending over 15 years. Let's just take a look at what's on the list. We got road safety, public transit, Amtrak. Amtrak Joe is back with $80 billion. $174 billion for electric vehicles. Okay. The government is going to be buying a bunch. All right. $25 billion for airports, ports, neighborhoods. We have $20 billion for neighborhoods historically excluded from transportation investments. Okay. New projects, $25 billion. No idea what those are. We have infrastructure resilience with special emphasis on vulnerable areas, $50 billion. It's like a grocery list. They just go down and, all right, well, we need $45 billion worth of lemons. We need $56 billion worth of modernizing water systems. We need $10 more billion for fixing substances in drinking water. Okay, got it. Housing and education. They want to retrofit 2 million houses. That's going to cost $213 billion. $100 billion for broadband for the rural areas, for the people who have difficulty getting on the internet out there. It's minorities, as Joe Biden said. $100 billion for power infrastructure, which is, it's all good, right? Veteran affairs, hospitals, good. $400 billion for home and community care for the elderly. Expand access, improve wages. Research and development. So the National Science Foundation, we've got R&D for innovation and job creation, research and development. We have $40 billion is going to historically black colleges and universities, as well as minority serving institutions. So there you go. $10 billion for those, $15 billion for those centers. Another $35 billion in climate research and development. So got to do some more research. We don't have enough studies on any of this. So we need $35 billion more for it. Okay. All right. Manufacturing and labor, $300 billion for manufacturing and small business. So they're going to take the money out of business and then give it back to businesses. Okay. So $50 billion for a new office, for a new office focused on domestic industry. For a new office focus. So they're going to create a new government entity. That's nice. $50 billion for research and manufacturing for semiconductors. Okay, so I guess they're going to funnel that out to what, IBM, or what's the company? Intel and AMD. Nvidia. We got $30 billion for new jobs and to fend off losses during future pandemics. So we're paying for future pandemics. $46 billion for federal buying, various clean technologies. $20 billion regional innovation hubs. $14 billion, increasing competitiveness through technological advances. How is the government going to do that? Increasing competitiveness through technological advances. Do you think Facebook and Google and Amazon need any more help from the government on increasing competitiveness? Does this mean that they're going to break them up? Because they're pretty anti-competitive right now. Can't imagine that's what they're talking about. We got $52 billion to domestic manufacturers. The list just goes on. Nobody even knows what it means. They don't even know what it means. They're just coming up with a bunch of new money to just rifle out to whomever they want. The whole thing is just, it happens every year. This is what these politicians do. They don't know what else to do. They can't do anything else, really. What do they solve other than just racking up a bunch of bills? Here is Larry Kudlow over on Fox Business.
Welcome to Kudlow. I'm
with
Larry
some reaction.
Kudlow. Pleasure to be here. Stocks today closed lower, I guess, across the board. Wall Street may be waiting for President Joe Biden's big announcement on infrastructure. President Biden expected to unveil his plans, this alleged infrastructure plan, I should say, which, frankly, is going to...
Yeah, so he goes on, and says that this is going to turn into universal basic income, which I think is accurate. I mean, it's kind of like that. We're already seeing, I covered this yesterday, I think 21 senators now are saying that they want recurring stimulus payments because this is not supposed to be over. This pandemic is supposed to go on for a long period of time. Posted a clip over on Twitter from the CDC director saying that she fears a doomsday is coming. We're also seeing other countries around the world sort of locking back down again. And they want to keep this stuff going. They want to just milk you for as much taxes as they can under the premise that they can't reopen and they have to dole this stuff back out to the American people. Now, they're saying this could take a long time. Tax and experts and lawmakers expect the administration to try to raise taxes on the wealthy and their assets in the second package coming later this spring. With legislative prospects uncertain and given the time it takes for an infrastructure package to get implemented, economists largely held back from projections on the potential growth impact of Biden's plan. Yeah, because it's not going to grow anything. These are projects that play out over a long period of time, said Michael Pugliese, an economist at Wells Fargo. It's years and potentially as long as decades to get some of this stuff done, built, completed, and the economic impact there is going to be a lot different than when you take a very large amount of money and hand it to individuals through direct checks and employment benefits. And so, you're going to have economists battling all over this stuff. And there's one theory that is essentially saying that if the government takes a bunch of money out of the government and then they spend it, they're sort of incentivizing spending, they're sparking the spend. They're out there driving the economy by pumping a bunch of money into it. So you have sort of the Austrian school of economics versus the Keynesian school of economics if you want to learn more about that. But that's kind of where the liberal argument is typically that. Well, the government, if they're going to spend a bunch of stuff and do a bunch of things, that's going to be better for the country because they're going to put $1 in the government machine and that's going to spit out $2 in the economic machine for the country. I'm not so sure that happens. In my opinion, I think that I can do a better job multiplying that $1 than the government can. I can take it and invest it. I can mix it with my labor and turn it into something valuable. The government doesn't. What are we taught? Well, where does all this money even go? So that's my thought on that. Mitch McConnell's here, says there would be a bipartisan support for a serious targeted infrastructure plan. Unfortunately, less than 6% of this massive White House proposal would go to roads and bridges. It's not about that. Nobody cares about that. It would spend more on electric cars than on roads, bridges, ports, and airports and waterways combined. Yeah, because it's about that. It's not about any of this stuff. All right, what does this say? U.S. Senate Republican leader issued the following statement regarding the administration's so-called infrastructure proposal. Our nation could use a serious targeted infrastructure plan. There would be bipartisan support. Unfortunately, this is a major missed opportunity. Less than 6%, we got that. The proposal appears to use, quote, infrastructure as a Trojan horse for the largest set of tax hikes in a generation. These sweeping tax hikes would kill jobs and hold down wages at the worst possible time Americans try to dig themselves out from the pandemic. But don't worry, coastal elites, House Democrats, and demanding a special SALT carve-out that would cut taxes for wealthy people in blue states. What? I'm going to have to look into that. A SALT carve-out? Sounds on brand for them. Democrats keep trying to use important issues as smokescreens for unrelated agendas. That's why their partisan COVID bill focused on non-COVID related liberal goals like bailing out mismanaged states and breaking the link between welfare and work. That's why their so-called voting rights bill tees up a one-party takeover of our democracy with radical changes like turning the FEC into a Democrat-run partisan body. We passed, blah, 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 fewer than 90 votes. Democrats should stop worrying about pleasing the far left and work across the aisle. So that's Mitch McConnell out there. And, we're not real sure how this bill goes, whether it passes or not. Administration officials said Biden is open to input from Congress of both parties on what should be kept in the final package and how to pay for them. So this is kind of an opening offer. Expects to have a robust outreach program to GOP lawmakers. It's committed to serious discussions with them. Biden plans don't necessarily need Republican support to become law. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Pelosi could choose to fit many of the president's proposals into one or more budget reconciliation bills, which only require a simple majority vote in the Senate. The challenge here is, as Pelosi has already indicated, that not all elements could fit into such a bill, which set certain requirements for inclusion. So if they can't get this through the parties, which they probably won't, maybe they will, who knows, they got to come back and do it through the regular budget process. And they can get that passed with a simple majority vote through the reconciliation process, which I think is how they got Obamacare passed. Remember when that happened? So here are some questions from watchingthewatchers.locals.com if you want to ask them. That's the place to be. Here is Liberty or Death in the House says, come on. Creepy Joe raising taxes after the tyrants shut down the country is obviously going to increase wealth and jobs in the nation. Not allowed to call it theft. I impeach you. I've been impeached. Liberty moved to impeached. So impeached. There it is. So yeah, right. It's weird. It's weird. It's like I kind of have a better idea of what to do with my life than the government does. But not everybody does, apparently. Apparently, people are just willing to turn it all over to Joe. Here you go, Joe. Solve all my problems for me. Okay. Hack Consulting says, oh, great, an infrastructure bill. I don't want your crap, Biden. We have to repair the infrastructure to let you burn, for 6 months to help your election since you didn't trust your fortification results to work. At Faithjoy. Good to see you, Hack. Norovira in the House says, how much of that is actually going inside the U.S. and not to other countries and to pockets of politicians? Probably most of it. Yeah, I mean, most of it is going to be siphoned off somewhere. So you may see some actual money, trickle down into the states and different organizations, and there's going to be grants up the wazoo to everybody who wants one. And maybe that spurs some economic development. I don't know. But we were highly critical of the $1.9 trillion COVID bill. We saw how many millions and billions of dollars were being sent overseas for their COVID problems, even though we got a lot of our own problems here at home. So not surprising at all. We've got News Now Wyoming says, come on, they let Trump spend a few trillion, so it makes plenty of sense to bring the 4-year total that is spent by this administration to at least 15 trillion. No less than that seems appropriate. Yeah, it's like you get to multiply the last guy's, times 4? 3? 3.5? 4 times 3.5, 3.25, whatever that is, 15 trillion. Sounds good. Who cares? Nobody's even keeping track anymore. Not our problem. Guess who's going to have to pay for it? Our generation and our generation's kids. Jeremy Matrita says, when it comes to tax hikes, everything rolls downhill. Increasing taxes on, quote, corporations means less money for raises. Increased taxes on goods and services means higher prices. No matter what, we will all have less money to spend. Yeah, and not to mention inflation, not to mention the printing of money. And this is just something that feels good for a lot of people, right? People like, oh, Amazon. Oh, gosh, these massive corporations. Tax the hell out of them. And they buy most of their stuff through the corporations. What do you think the corporation is going to do? Just stop making money? No. Those get passed on to you people. The same ones who are out there lauding these tax raises. Ugh. News Now Wyoming says, I just wonder if Kamala will make him stop so there is money left for her to spend that we don't already have when it's her turn in 2 years. It's a good, yeah. In 2 years, obviously, when Kamala is the new president after the midterms, as soon as they make her the president, she's going to have, look, Joe, you spent all my Skrilla, my man. Not good. We got Sharon Quidney says, writing checks you don't have in the bank to cover. It's called fraud. Also, in some quarters, paper hanging. If I did what the government is doing, I'd be sitting in jail. So this is terrible, but where are we on HR 1, which is institutionalized erection frogs? Oh, I know. HR 1, I don't know. I haven't looked that one up recently. Last I saw were some headlines about they're doing what they can to eke through a filibuster exception. They want this through, and for good reason, because it's going to cement their power for the rest of my life if they get it through, which leads me to be a little bit concerned about it. Hack Consulting says, hey guys, we stop people from going to work. Why is the economy broken? It's a good question. It's probably because not as many people are wearing face masks. If more people were wearing face masks, the economy would be perfect. Something like that. I think that's the argument. We have Sharon Quidney says, I'm somebody who hires people to do stuff. The more money I have, the more people I can hire. The less money, the fewer people I can pay. So am I. I hire somebody too. And you should see what our tax bills look like. Every time my business partner handles most of that, he comes in, tells me about it. I about jump through the friggin' roof. I'm like, bro, do you realize what we could do with that? Do you realize what marketing campaign we could do? Do you realize how many people we could help? We could hire somebody to do this, somebody to do this, somebody to do this, because we want to help. There are so many other bad lawyers around this country that it just irritates me that some of these guys are out there practicing law, doing a terrible job, and we don't have all of the resources that we need to nudge them out of the market a little bit. Okay, I happen to be a little bit aggressive with a lot of things in my life, and that's kind of how I want to run the show. But when I see that we are not able to do that because the government is siphoning off just gobs of money, it's like, okay, I guess we'll just stay the same. Or I guess we'll eke out a little bit of a profit and grow slowly. We could grow so much more quickly if we just had the funds that the government rips off from us every month. And people think that like I'm just going to go dump that in my bank account and buy a nice car, buy a nice house. I am okay with all of that. I'm good. I want to grow the company. I want to leave a mark on the world. I want to move the needle. And the government makes it harder to do that. But it makes some people feel good. We have NY Renal MD says, even though it's a pandemic this year, it may make sense for me to not work extra, even though society would need me. Biden doesn't seem to distinguish for people who work and do things. Democrats seem to want to equally punish based on a dollar amount. No look at what or cost or how much I had to work to get to this point. Years of making less than minimum wage. Yeah, I know. And I have a very similar story. Very similar story. There were times in law school where I was wondering if my electricity would be on when I got home. I worked for free for 2 years. 2 years for free. And I had my jerk of a boss tell me, hey, your clothes, those don't work here. Go get nicer clothes. Because I was wearing crappy clothes. Because I had no money. Because I was working for free while in law school for 2 years. Right? There are those types of business people out there. They exist. Kind of the nature of the world. But there are also good people who really want to help and be of service to the rest of the community. It's my story, man. And government makes it harder. The biggest problem for many people's lives is the government. I know that might seem radical, but it's not. There's only one entity in my life that makes my job harder every day. It's federal government. We got Liberty or Death says, I think it's funny that the ones pushing for the tax hikes and raising the minimum wage are the ultra wealthy in Silicon Valley. So we can tax people out of a job, give you a check for unemployment and UBI, and the tech companies can make the robots to automate minimum wage jobs. All this crap they're trying to do should be done either under the 10th Amendment or by the private sector. Agreed. 1 of 50 of everything in DC should be in your state capital. Completely asinine. Yeah, we could, I would really support a dramatic rollback of the size and the scope of the federal government for that reason. Many of these things, I think, are best left to the states, individual localities, individuals, and communities. Government wants to sort of encompass everything, all of the different responsibilities in your life, and they're terrible at it. They do a horrible job at it. We have Want to Know says, Rob, shouldn't the states be doing all of this? Maybe private industries? Yes and yes. So yes to both of those. Better than the federal government, because the federal government in Washington is they're going to say, hey, we're going to take $50 billion for rails. Okay. That money is going to come from everybody in the country, and it's going to be more or less evenly sort of accumulated. Then they're going to divvy it out where they see fit. It's a centralized, planned economy. Those don't work well. Look around the country, look around the world, look around the history of the world. They are not good at managing resources. Markets are way better at that. So yeah, and look at this. I mean, look at the things that you use on a daily basis. Cell phone, computer, camera, microphone, whatever. It's all from private industry. The government tries to regulate it, this is approved by the FCC, or we checked to make sure this was safe or whatever. And people go, hey, I feel nice and safe here. Reality is that's just a little safety blanket that I think we could do with a lot less of. We have Chairman of the Board says $30 billion for climate research. Spoiler alert, if your research shows that there is nothing to panic about, you just killed your cash cow. Given that, I wonder what the research will show. Well, it's going to show that the world is melting down. Even though they said that, they've been saying that my whole life. Step 1, pass a spending bill, spending trillions on infrastructure using union labor. Step 2, union employees work and pay dues. Step 3, unions contribute to Democratic politicians. This is political money laundering. Yeah, and it happens every day. That's just standard operating procedure. We have It's Ed in the house says, hey, Faith. Hi, Ma. Rob, you sound surprised about this spending bill. Uncle Joe needs to pay back all the unions for all the votes. Yeah, I'm not surprised. If I sound surprised, that's my bad on that. This is obviously what we all knew was coming, right? It's, okay, here it is. How much now? All right. Okay. Come back again, right? We know that this is coming. We knew it was coming. We have Bessa Mento says, Robert, these massive spending bills is how the very rich get much richer. Yes, it is. Do you know why? It's because taxes. So think about this. These oligarchs that are in the higher portions of the power structure, they actually love this stuff. Because when they raise taxes, It's like pulling the ladder up behind you, right? It's the same thing like Amazon did this. And I've brought this up many times. Amazon, during their early years, they did not have to pay tax. You did not have to pay taxes on the products that you bought. I don't know if you remember that, but that was a big selling feature because they didn't have a physical store. Some of the case law had not been settled by the U.S. Supreme Court and others. And they were allowed to sell you a product and you did not have to pay sales tax on it. It was a big advantage. They wiped out other retail stores under that advantage because people would say, well, I'm going to save $100. I'm going to go buy this over at Amazon, save $100 on this big purchase. So the other places had a disadvantage. Amazon was exploiting the rules. Guess what happens? Amazon gets massive, and Jeff Bezos, brilliant man, said one of his key strategies was to get big fast. If you read anything that he's ever written, he talks about this. We have to get big fast. Big, really big. When they got that big, guess what happened? They have a monopoly on the market. They're now okay with paying taxes. So they had a competitive advantage to get them to the top. Once they're at the top, they want to get rid of the competitive advantage. They don't want other small entities to be able to use that. So all of that got reformed. They pulled the ladder up from under them. Same with all of these companies, Google and Facebook and whatnot. So when you have some of this happening, right, the people who are already ensconced in the higher echelon of society, they're all protected largely because everyone else is going to be at a disadvantage because the money is being taken out from your paycheck. You don't have the same earning capacity or the saving capacity that they did at a lower tax rate. Same for same for everybody. So there's a key use of tax code to preserve those and to separate the haves from the have-nots. So when they're out there talking about this in terms of, well, this is going to be equal. We're going to equalize the classes. I just told you. I was in a networking meeting last week. It's like a coaching group, but the whole point is those people are going to do everything possible, and they have the resources to spend on massive advisors who are going to just orchestrate the whole thing for them. Oh, this changed? Perfect. Move that there, move this here, change this, all that. Okay, most people, myself included, don't have those resources. So while everybody's spiking the ball, slapping themselves on the back on the left, saying, "Oh, these rich people, yeah, raise their taxes." No, it's going to be your taxes. You're going to be the ones who are paying for it. You may not realize it yet. You may think, "Oh, it's only the people over $400,000." No, it's not how that works. It's coming out of somewhere. It's going to get passed down. The rich are going to stay that way, and they have the resources to stay that way. These taxes on the rich are going to apply to probably every single one of us, making $400,000 or not. It's a scam. We have Norovirus says, abandon the federal government, just succeed as states, and then better as counties. Local. Yes, Nora. Local is better. We have Jeremy Matrida says, Elon Musk already took care of the internet connections in rural areas with Starlink and found much less cost than the government could do it. Yeah, because the government is inept. They're incompetent. This guy just, look, here's the government. We're going to sink a ton of money into the space program. It sucks. Doesn't do it. I mean, it's great, right? We get to the moon. It's all well and good. It's great. But then it sort of fizzles out. Elon comes in. I'm going to take over the rocket launching thing, government. Nice try. Watch how I do it. Does it better? Does it faster? Does it for a fraction of the cost? Same thing with the internet. Well, the whole globe needs internet. Okay, I'm Elon. I'll go ahead and do that. Here you go. Use the rockets that I built to launch a bunch of satellites up into the sky to cover the globe in like a Dyson sphere of internet connectivity. It's pretty good. You know, Elon is very interesting. I had this thought in my head the other day. I'll share it with you right now. Elon is sort of organizing a decentralized world right now in real time. Do you realize this? What Elon is doing is he's freeing you from a lot of the old world connections that you still kind of have right now, right? You're still, if you're driving a regular car, a gas-powered car, you're still connected to the grid because you got to stop at a gas station. You can't go and refine oil somewhere and pump it into your car. You're reliant on the system. Teslas make it much less so. So you can be sort of decentralized a little bit. You don't rely on one central provider of fuel. You can actually just get power from the sun, be totally off the grid. Oh, You can't get power from the sun? That's okay. Guess what Elon's going to do? He's going to sell you some solar panels that you put on your house and a supercharger, Tesla charger, that you can hang on your door in your house. That's going to be a big battery pack that will help you facilitate all of this. Totally off the grid. So what's next? Oh, we don't have to be connected to a oil supply anymore. Well, what else do we need? Well, you got to have, and you're free to you can transport yourself. So the Tesla, through the electricity power that it has, gives you free mobility, the ability to travel around. You know what a gift that is? To be able to just kind of pull your car over, charge up, and keep going without being supplied or connected to a grid. Super powerful. What else does he have? Well, internet. If you don't have internet, how do you communicate with anybody? You're also tied to your local provider. You're tied to, here in Arizona, it's Cox Communications or Quest or any one of these providers. You're connected to them. They are pseudo-government entities, right? They're sort of this conglomerate, this monopolistic sort of pseudo-private company that is also connected. It's a public utility, so it's this weird category. And you're relying on them for your electricity, for your water, fuel, and all that stuff. But also for your internet. Elon's going to take that leash off of you as well with Starlink. Pay a small fee. Now you can get internet anywhere in the world. Don't have to be connected to anything. And you're seeing these little things just kind of bubble up. He's dumping money in Bitcoin. What's happening with that? I think you can buy a Tesla in Bitcoin now. Pulling off of the centralized financial system. Decentralized blockchain. A lot of these billionaires are thinking this way. He moved to Texas. He's forming his own town, Starlink, or Starbase, something like that in Texas. More and more of this is happening over these years. So I'm just flagging it for you. Keep an eye on some of this, right? People are talking about secession. They're talking about leaving the country or the country's failing. These billionaire people are thinking in a different category. They're sort of layering on levels of decentralization that are going to make them living within the containers of federal governments and nation states while they're really sort of operating in an alternative environment on the blockchain, off of the grid, communicating with other people who are also tired of the government. Guy I was listening to over the weekend, Balaji, I think is how he says it, Srinivasan. Actually, he's on Tim Ferriss's podcast. I'd listen to that. Fascinating conversation. All about decentralization. And I think that might be an answer to some of this stuff. You may have noticed we kind of stopped talking about the freedom of speech stuff on this channel, right? Well, it's like there are alternatives that are popping up that are technological solutions to a lot of these real world issues. And when Trump got deplatformed and when we had a long conversation about what this means for internet censorship, I was a little bit hopeful there. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but I was saying specifically, this is the darkness before the light. This is where a lot of conservatives are going to be out in the wilderness trying to wrap their head around how to solve this. The billionaire class is working on it right now. There's a whole group of people who are just kind of tired of living in this world where they are demonized to the point of no return. Because these are the people who really do solve a lot of the world's problems, whether you want to admit that or not. They do. They make the world a better place and they're being penalized. You're seeing even Amazon News come out now and go after Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders on Twitter. They're just people are getting sick of it. Because the people who really are the gears of this country, they're being scolded on a daily basis. Evil and corrupt and greedy, and they don't care about people, and this is not who we are, and they're getting tired of it. And they should, for good reason, because the federal government has become overbearing. All right, No Doubt says, constitutional amendment limiting taxing authority of the federal government. I would absolutely support that, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. We have No Doubt also says, and that is why they want to tax you based on miles driven now, because the electric cars don't pay fuel taxes. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Pete Buttigieg was talking about that. Nadarbs said, have you heard about the library versus the SEC thing going on? The SEC is attacking crypto. I have seen that. I actually have an account over there. I don't think I've uploaded anything because their portal was a little bit broken, but they are the people who are behind Odyssey, which is a competition platform to YouTube. Yeah, they're heating up, right? The power structure is pushing back against these decentralized entities. And if you listen to that Tim Ferriss podcast with Balaji, he explains that this is a real risk. You know, the federal government at some point is going to be coming after Bitcoin and a lot of these cryptocurrencies in an effort to stop the decentralization that's taking place, because it is really removing a lot of power from the bureaucracy, which is a good thing. We have Hack Consulting says, free markets also bring us people that want to monopolize power. So yeah, we are already getting the joys of free markets, even when tyranny comes approaching. No one offered proper competition for too long. Gruler 2024, no excuses. Well, I appreciate that ringing endorsement there, Hack Consulting. You know, politics, that's a whole nother ballgame. Does anybody have the stomach for that anymore? Look what they have to go through. It's insane. All right. So that is it for the show, everybody. I want to thank you so much. Great questions. Good conversation there, especially about the taxes. I can't stand taxes. I just want to rant for hours. And so I probably overstayed my welcome on that topic, but thank you for indulging me. And thanks for being part of the great program. We had some great questions coming in from watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is the place to be if you're not already over there. Let's say thank you to the great people who are over there. We've got Sharon Quidney in the house. Good to see Ma Fox with a couple questions and some great help today. We got Faith Joy, who I am going. We're going to have we got a couple things we got to talk about today after the show, which is why we're not doing a clubhouse. But we've got Jen McClellan in the house, Saline Sal. We've got Feisty Lady who signed up. We also have JT6058. We got the Mariner. Who else do we have? Kula Bula. We also have Power Man, Judy Utah, Penny Tig, Lou Walker, See the Veil, I'm a Lemon. We have Sheila Moe. We got Bulletproof 7, Jay Bartel. And then we have Pato, who signed up. Let me move myself so we can welcome the newcomers. We got Pato. Welcome to the crew, my friend. We got Spoiler, who signed up yesterday. JR4, Honey Brown in the house. Just Luke, Uncle Bob's BMW, FFMORG, which I think is a Kodak, Whipple one, and many others. Welcome to the community, everybody. Thank you for signing up and joining us and supporting the show over there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you want to sign up, it's a great place to do it. You can support us. Get a free copy of my book. It's over there. You can download that as a PDF. Get a copy of the slides that we posted here today. Any impeachment party documents. If you're feeling saucy and you want to impeach somebody, there's some templates you can use to do so. Also, this Existence Systems program, I'm working on turning this into a little bit of an online course. So we're in the middle of a process there, building that out. If you want to go get access to this right now, you can get it. There is also links and conversation that happens throughout the day. But the real reason, all of the great people. So go on over to Locals and find our community called watchingthewatchers.locals.com. It's the Watching the Watchers community right over there. So would love to see you there. Also, before we get out of here, quick reminder, I am a criminal defense lawyer. I'm here at the R&R Law Group. We're in Scottsdale, Arizona. We love to help good people who have been charged with crimes. We like to help them find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and in their lives. We're very good at what we do. We offer free case evaluations. We can help anybody who's been in trouble with the law in the state of Arizona. So it's things like misdemeanor cases, even traffic cases. We have criminal speeding, reckless driving, driving on a suspended license. It's a class 1 misdemeanor here in Arizona. Did you know that? Same as a DUI, serious offense. So there are some traffic offenses that are very serious here that we help with. But it's mostly misdemeanors, things like DUIs, domestic violence, drugs, felony offenses, some of the minor cases, the more serious cases. We can help people remove mugshots off the internet. We can help people restore their rights so that they have the right to vote and so that they can possess a firearm again. It's your Second Amendment right. We want to have that. It's pretty important. So we can help with all that stuff. So if you happen to know anybody who has been charged with a crime, we would be honored and humbled if you send them our way. We'll take very good care of them. Make sure they leave better than when they found us. So that's it for me, everybody. I want to thank you for being here today. We have it's a good show. Good show. Kind of a long show, 2 hours there. Got through some good stuff. We're going to do it again, though, tomorrow. So we hope to see you here. We're going to be back here 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is the same as Pacific time. So that means it's 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast for Florida Man and those of you out that direction. Everybody, sleep very well tonight. Hopefully you had a lovely dinner. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.